Uh, so we will keep your mics on mute, of course, as the session goes, and feel free to use the chat. We'll monitor that, and we will also have questions. Leave time for questions at the end once our presenters have gotten through this. So just a couple of brief comments from me before I turn it over to our knowledgeable guests. But the SSBA certainly has an interest in supporting boards of education when it comes to school food programs. It's not new. Boards have been at this, and you folks around the table are a testament to that for decades, in fact, in this province. But there certainly has been some increased attention in recent months and years. And our boards of education last fall presented a year ago, I guess I should say, fall presented a resolution for us to step up our efforts and advocacy around this, and we're very grateful to that. We have initiated a school food programs roundtable that includes one representative from each of the 27 school boards. Really, it's been, we've only met once, we're meeting again shortly. It's an effective structure to hear from folks on the ground on what divisions are thinking and to be able to provide some supports to them. Hence, the school food program speaker series today, one of the ideas that came from that. As importantly, we were blessed and pleased at the SSBA to have Kaylee Michnick here as one of the presenters come to us as a PhD candidate who's doing and has done research in this area as a fellowship, and she is with us for the better part of this year. And so it is really her leadership and commitment that has us here today to share some of her good research and information around this. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee to start the presentation. So Kaylee Michnick is a school food programs researcher and registered dietitian to the U of S and SSBA, working to support best practice evidence and advanced research in school food programs through data collection, partnership, knowledge exchange, and advocacy. Kaylee's presentation will cover the new national school food policy and current research in this area. Stephanie Foster is also here. Welcome, Stephanie, a former teacher and principal with a passion for community level food security. She's proud to work as project manager for a number of U of S school food research projects. Stephanie's presentation will highlight a suite of new resources available to plan, manage, and budget for school food programs. And Derek Smith is here. Welcome, Derek, a learning superintendent who joined Prairie Valley School Division in 2014, has taken great pride in leading their system-wide school food programs, a role he continues to fulfill with passion and dedication. As part of the Prairie Valley School Division Board of Ed's strategic plan, Derek's presentation will highlight their efforts to tailor school food programs to meet the unique needs of students and families and enhance the effectiveness of these programs. So welcome to each of you, and I'll turn it over to Kaylee.
Hi, everyone. So happy to have so many folks here today. We had a really good turnout for registration. Over 100 people registered for this series, and we will have, as Ted mentioned, this available on the SSBA YouTube channel to follow. This is our first session in a series of speaker series that's going to go in February, March, and then again in May. So we're trying to bring together speakers from across Saskatchewan featuring local school divisions, local projects, and local research to really highlight the innovations and effective practices that are happening in Saskatchewan. This is in light of a national school food policy and all the continued advocacy that the SSBA is doing with school boards across the province to continue to improve and develop and share best practices for school food programs in this province. Today, our session, the main theme is around planning comprehensive school food programs. Next month, we're going to focus on Indigenous health, well-being, and cultures through school food programs, and with more themes to follow, so stay tuned. My presentation today, as Ted mentioned, is going to focus a little bit on what's going on with the National School Food Program. Some of you may have already heard me speak a little bit about this. It's certainly been sort of my tour in the last couple months when I go to different events or I'm invited to different speaking things. So bear with me as I get everybody here on the same page as we kind of launch the speaker series. So I'm going to bring up my slides. Give And bear with us, this is the first session of a few, so there may be some technical difficulties that we encounter, but hopefully not. We'll be monitoring the chat, so you can let us know if anything goes on your side. Um, okay. And everybody, somebody, Shayna or Ted, you can see my slides?
I can, yep.
Okay, I can no longer see people's faces, so Ted and Shayna will monitor the chat, and I will be your moderator for the remaining hour and a half that we have here today together. So to get into it, Ted gave a wonderful introduction. I'm so pleased to be with SSBA this year, supporting school food development and research. It's an incredible organization to be placed within. And I'd also like to thank the CIHR and the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation for their sponsorship of this internship with the SSBA. My main work over the last few years has been as a researcher examining school food programs, and that's under Dr. Rachel Engler-Stringer at the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm trying to finish up my PhD in some of that work. And my PhD work mainly focused on examining universal school lunch programs in the Saskatoon Public School, I always call it the Saskatoon Public School Division, but Saskatoon Public Schools. What I hope about today in speaking to you about um, the National School Food Program is to begin to think about how Saskatchewan's placed within that context and what we can learn from what's going on nationally and a little bit of research I've been involved in at a national level to begin a discussion about where we are in Saskatchewan and where we can go from here. We have a lot of different partners here today. It was very intentional to invite people from both education, health, food sector, nutrition, um, government, all different levels so that we can begin to have these conversations together. And we can support one another in this work. So in general, what are school food programs? And I'm sure many of you here are already connected to them and are aware of it. But in general, school food programs are lunch, breakfast, or snacks in schools with or without integration into curriculum. High quality school food programs from around the world have been demonstrated to improve and contribute to national and provincial educational, environmental, economic, social, and health goals. And they support and encourage children to attend school, support their learning, and prepare them for success. As Ted mentioned, school food programs are not a new thing. They've been happening in Saskatchewan for decades, as well as internationally. But here in Canada, this is the first time we have a national school food policy, and I'll get into that. But when we talk about school food programs in Canada, I'm actually part of a book that's coming out led by Dr. Amberly Ritz and Dr. English Stringer about promising school food programs across Canada. So it'll be one of the first books that's out about school food programs, and that'll be printed through UBC Press coming out hopefully very soon. But what we found from examining school food programs in Canada is that they really do vary greatly across the country. While many school food programs are innovative and operate exemplary programs that impact communities and support students, many of them are also underfunded and rely on volunteers or educational staff to operate. Many are typically offered based on need, so not always extending universally to all students in a school or in a classroom. Equipment and space is often very limited, meaning that many school food programs are operating out of classrooms or home-style type kitchens, which can be effective, but also at times very ineffective, depending on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish with your program, and can lead to quite a source of frustration and sometimes food safety concerns. And while different school food program guidelines exist across Canada, the enforcement really is quite limited. They're not monitored greatly, and there's often not enough money to actually implement some of these guidelines effectively. And so that means that the quality and the cultural appropriateness and nutrition of meals and snacks can vary greatly across the country, and sometimes vary within a school division. When we talk about why we want to encourage school food programs, there are actually a lot of reasons, and I've highlighted three here that I thought were relevant to our discussion today and as we examine as we go across the school food speaker series over the coming months. But they really do support diet quality in students. And what we see is that across the socioeconomic spectrum, children generally consume a poor quality diet at school. Now, that might And this is sometimes this includes both lunches at school as well as lunches brought from home. And this you might think is a small thing, but children typically consume about a third of their daily energy or nutrition at school. And then compounded with this is that generally across Canada, we see that the intake for students' nutrition is quite poor, with limited fruits and vegetables and highly processed food. So really, school food programs are a really great opportunity to make a significant impact on the diets of students. And when I say this is across the socioeconomic spectrum, it's true because not only does lack of money sometimes lead to poor quality diet, but also poverty of time. When a family has a lot of working adults, and then plus when there's a lot of convenience, and our convenience foods tend to be less healthy. So everybody can benefit from a healthy school food program. They also really contribute to well-being. So school meals can be a chance, and they are a chance for students to socialize, have fun, and develop friendships. They can increase feelings of connectedness in the school and create a sense of belonging. And they're here to promote a cultural identity. Meals and nutrition, as well as that food education that's based in diverse worldviews. So, if we're incorporating land-based learning, elders and knowledge keepers, family members, and community members, it can help and support increased acceptability of food served and improve cultural understandings and sense of identity for children. Another concept that comes out quite strongly in a lot of advocacy work across Canada, including with SSBA, is what is a universal school food program, and why do we hear about this a lot? If you're familiar with the Coalition for Healthy School Food, that's one of their principal. It's a national advocacy organization for school food, in which our national school food policy is very closely related to. So all these benefits that can occur with school food programs are only increased when we offer universal school food programs. So a universal model is accessible to all children, regardless of the family socioeconomic status. And as I mentioned before, right now, a lot of these programs are only really based on need. And this can be because of resources, time, knowledge, for lots of different reasons. And that's fine. But when we offer these targeted programs, sometimes there can be a reluctance from families and students to participate for the fear of not wanting to be seen as a poor family who maybe can't provide for their children, or being a poor kid at school. And this can create a barrier to participation. So some is demonstrating that, when we provide these targeted programs for children, sometimes we miss them. There's a miss because of that stigma attached. In New Zealand, after the country adopted universal meal programs in select schools, they found improved food security for families, enhanced equity, enhanced well-being for students and families, reduced financial hardship and stress for them as well. In the US, implementation of universal accessible school food programs led to a 15% decline in student suspension rates by the third year. And so the overall goal and the end goal of some of this advocacy work is, in the end, the national advocacy work is that every student in every school in Canada would have at least one program available, breakfast, lunch, or snack, at no cost, and ideally, most students would participate. Where we are right now in Canada, and this is recent research that came out by one of my colleagues, Dr. Amberly Retz, um, is that 52% of schools in Canada have a government-funded school food program. So about half of schools have them. We see that the highest availability is the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Newfoundland, Labrador, and PEI, with her survey estimating 100% that all schools have a program available. But having an available program doesn't mean that's accessible to everybody. So on average, 25% of school-age students participate in a school food program in the country. So that's only 1 in 4 children. The highest participation rates we're seeing are in Newfoundland and PEI. Um, so they do offer in 100% of their schools, where it's about 70%, 60% of students participating. And then in some cases, like in Manitoba, 94% have schools, but there's participation of only 30% of students. So we are seeing a gap led by numerous reasons, as I mentioned before. If we look at our Saskatchewan context, Saskatchewan currently sits with data collected by the Coalition for Healthy School Food, where they're monitoring provincial and municipal funding into school food programs. Saskatchewan has the lowest per student funding of school food programs across the country, and we sit at about 4 cents per day per student in government funding. This is in comparison to places like BC, who are sitting at 64 cents, and Manitoba, 77, and PEI, which does have the highest per student funding in the country at $1.35. The cost of a nutritious hot lunch for students in Saskatoon, what we found in previous research, was $4.42. So we can see that there is a gap. There's quite a discrepancy in funding. And as part of looking at advancing funding for school food programs and what's coming out with the National School Food Policy is a cost-shared approach. And that, for example, in our research in Saskatoon, if it's about 4.42 per day, this could be cost shared between school boards, between provinces, between the federal government, and perhaps families as well as continued funding from different organizations that are already investing in supporting school food programs. In Saskatchewan, research last year by the SSBA showed that more than half of schools offered a school food program, and we're reaching about a quarter of students. This is on the lower end compared to the national coverage rates. So there is work to be done. And really, so far, the work that has been done in this province to deliver school meals to children and youth has been the result of leadership and commitment of boards of education, school divisions, and those partners, and many of you who are on the call today, who are doing this work in spite of limited resources. So I would really like to, send a thank you to all those who are here today, who are involved in this very work, despite the challenges that we face some days. So as I mentioned before, the National School Food Program, as many of you, as I'm sure have heard, came out last April. And there was a $1 billion commitment from the Trudeau government over 5 years to expand school food program access by 400,000 more students each year. So far to date, there has been 4 deals signed, one in PEI, one in Newfoundland, Labrador, Manitoba, and Ontario. In Saskatchewan, given successful federal provincial negotiations, we would hope to see, at minimum, the funding similar to Manitoba of a similar demographic, of a similar population size, where they receive $17 million over the next 3 years. The vision of a national school food program is that all children and youth have access to nutritious food in an inclusive, non-stigmatizing environment that fosters healthy practices while strengthening connections with local food systems, the environment, and culture. I would say what goes on beyond this work that maybe is not always present in some provincial, well, that's present, we'll say kind of, it speaks very clearly here about the connections to local food systems, the environment, and culture. And so the principles are really around accessibility, so that we're moving towards removing those barriers, and universal offerings can support that they're health promoting, which many of us are familiar with already. But when we speak about health promoting, we speak about nutrition, as well as we speak about those environments, that they're healthy and positive in which children are eating. The inclusivities around that cultural appropriateness, and the flexibility in that there's local autonomy and connections to local communities and cultures. The sustainability is around financial and environmental. And then the last piece is accountability, which is the monitoring and evaluating. A lot of these programs haven't necessarily been evaluated rigorously or evaluated at all for their impacts and development. So I'm going to just move kind of to the next section of my presentation. And each speaker in this series has about 20 minutes to speak. So mine's going to come up in a couple minutes. So I'm going to focus now on some research that was conducted across Canada. And this was something that concluded last year. I think this report came out in April, and the time is just flying by to say that. But this was also, I was involved in a research project with Dr. Rachel Engler-Stringer and Dr. Roots and a few others who are on this call too. And this was a research study that was led by Dr. Amberly Retz. That was part of her postdoctoral work, which was examining promising cases of school food programs across Canada. And this was, we know that the National School Food Program, or we hope, is going to be announced, and it did end up getting to be so. But this was preemptive to begin to look at what's promising across the country, so that we're building from what exists and we're building from what works already in a national program. So really trying to center community and schools versus any more of a, top-down sort of approach. If you're interested in the report, the QR code is there on the side. And it'll also be my next slide too. So you can, if you'd like to have a look, you can pull your phone, and I hope the QR code works. So as I mentioned, the rationale really has been that these programs have been operating for decades. And as a dietitian for about 10 years, I will say a lot of school food program research will often focus on nutrition and what are those health outcomes. But how do we get to nutrition? How do we get to health outcomes? How do we get to well-being? It's really the implementation and how do these programs actually operate. So the research really began to focus on the implementation and operations, looking at best practices, which is pretty unique to be documented. It can be actually quite hard to find that information or really in-depth detail. So this is what this report really adds. For those here today who are thinking about developing or planning programs, I really suggest to have a look at these 15 case studies as a place to begin for inspiration and ideas that are working well across the country. So it does highlight a program in every province and territory. And there was a particular focus on making sure there was diverse sampling. So there's rural communities represented, remote, urban, and Indigenous communities. Data was collected by researchers who lived mainly near or in those communities or had connections, and went into the schools, talked to staff, looked at their costing data, looked at their financial records, and got a really good grasp about what was going on there. And I'll acknowledge that this case study report is the first report of a how-to series, and that through the University of Saskatchewan, trying to bring together best evidence about implementation of school food programs. And Steph's going to speak to next about the second report in this series. So it's all really exciting work and hopefully really helpful. So if you do have a look at this stuff, let us know if it is helpful. So the report, very briefly, it goes into profiling. It'll show a profile of each report. It'll talk about the goals and objectives of each, the impacts of this program, and will provide a sample menu. You'll see on the profiles that it goes through what kind, if it's a snack, is it a breakfast, how many schools does it serve, is it no cost to students, and what is the production model. So just a plethora of information that I can't cover completely here today. But what I think many people here that might be interested in is it actually gets to detail the resources and costs of programs. So to display where's the funding coming from, who are the different funding partners, what's the average cost per student meal, what sort of facilities and preparation are used based on the menu and the reach, how much staff is used, and different features of the food procurement. So are they getting it from donations, school gardens, wholesale local retailers? Lots of really good information to think about. So that was my very quick emphasis on that report, but I want to just talk a little bit about some main takeaways. As somebody who read and helped produce the report, I was always thinking oh, what they're doing that there, oh, they're doing that here. Oh, why aren't we doing this here? Could we, or are we doing it here in Saskatchewan? And those are questions I still have. But in general, what we began to identify from this report is that coordinated regional and school-wide programs may allow for the greatest cost and resource sharing. So in an Indigenous-led rural Alberta case study, we noticed that the cost of a universal breakfast, lunch, and snack was $4.47. And that, in fact, was the lowest costing in the country, or among. As I said before, our lunch program in Saskatoon sat at about $4.42 a few years ago. And here they're offering breakfast, lunch, and snack in rural Alberta for the same cost. So what was happening there? And in part, they have a regional model, they're securing local food producers, and they're working across their 10 schools. And you can read more. This is at Masquachese Education Schools Commission, and it's a really awesome program. In Nova Scotia, where they were doing individual principals were running individual programs, they decided that there was beginning to be to address regional discrepancies in the quality of school food. Government, health, and NGO partners came together to provide regional services for school food programs. So in Nova Scotia, regional staff were hired, including a food service manager and accounting clerk, and they helped support the compliance, staff training, equipment, costing, and menu planning. And they found that this approach allowed for more consistent expectations and services for the 23 schools in their region. We also noted that paid school staff are needed for comprehensive school food programming. It came up time and time again about the importance of this or the need, because even in our promising cases, some actually still didn't have paid school food staff. When volunteer school staff time is costed, the true cost of meal snacks is much higher. And without paid staff, there continues to be a trade-off between program quality and staff well-being as staff continues to stretch itself thin to do it all. So for example, in Manitoba, the cost of snack went from 16 cents per day per child to $1.11 when I looked at actually the principal's time for shopping in the city on the weekends and unloading the food at the schools, and the EA time that was used to prepare, serve, and clean up the snack. In Ontario, the cost went from 45 cents per day to $2.96 per day. And this was using the actual staff wages, so paying, for example, principal time to do this work. We also saw that investing in school food service staff training is needed for program development, scalability, and sustainability. There doesn't seem to be in Canada any really standardized training for school food workers. The closest I saw was in Yukon that cooks receive 34 days of training, including first aid, food safe, levels 1 and 2, knife skills, sauce making, building better teams, communication strategies. In Saskatchewan, in our case, when we worked with the school food workers from doing a targeted school food program to upskilling to universal, we saw that workers needed more training in kitchen management, scaling menus, culturally appropriate and sustainable foods, and how to work with students in the kitchen. So there needs to be that the best programs have skilled and trained staff, and they're quite effective. Other considerations, and as I draw to a close here, financial support. So these successful programs, as I mentioned before, still work through multiple partners and funders. And many of them are still receiving donations or working with rescued food, but it doesn't make the core operations of their programs generally. Environmental sustainability, that sometimes these upfront investments into commercial style dishwashers can seem very costly. But in some cases, when one case, when a dishwasher broke, we ended up spending $3,000 that month in disposables. So that really said to me what the cost of disposables really is when you have compared to a well-maintained dishwasher. Another really interesting thing is, how we can involve students in this environmental sustainability. In New Brunswick, they highlight a really interesting initiative around the school's green team, where they oversee recycling and composting from the cafeteria, and then the school garden uses the finished compost. Student learning achievement is well incorporated into successful school food programs. Students can earn high school food course credits through their school food program preparation, serving, and cleaning. And once again, at Masquachese First Nation, in our Indigenous-led Alberta case, 25% of the school staff, when this report was done, were former students who returned to work for the program and all received a full-time salary. So you can see about how student learning and achievement can really propel from some of these programs. In BC and Saskatchewan, school staff are offered or at the point of these cases, school staff were offered meals for free in exchange that they sit and eat with the students. So really about, there's options to build school community. There's definitely lots of ways to look at the inclusion of Indigenous and cultural foods in Alberta and Yukon. There are many examples in these cases of them using foraging and other land-based activities to connect to the school course. In our program highlighted in BC, all the protein foods that they served at the school were halal, and they offered it to the whole school. And they found this to be a cost-effective way versus making one-off meals that were just halal, and it minimized any errors in serving non-halal food to students. And of course, these programs continue to be flexible. They locally adapt to their student and community needs. Some are offering grab and go breakfasts, some are using breakfast bins, some are using lunches, and they're adjusted to the school schedule. I actually did the case study in Manitoba, and it was in a rural community where everybody got bussed in, and they said, well, we're not going to offer a lunch. The kids are coming really hungry after sitting on almost an hour bus ride for some of them. So they developed a breakfast program. And in some cases, external catering worked best versus having in-house, and they worked with external partners. So as I conclude here today, as we move forward from what we've learned, and I'll say, this presentation has been a collaboration of these thoughts. I've worked with my work with the Public Health Nutritionist Working Group of Saskatchewan, my work with the College of Pharmacy Nutrition at the university, with all my colleagues at the Department of Community Health and Epidemiology, as well as my work now with the Saskatchewan School Board Association. So this whole presentation, I should have said at the front, is accumulation of ideas, not just my own. But in general, we're looking at, as we move forward, as I said before, additional government investments into school food programs is needed. Signing a deal between the Saskatchewan government and the National School Food Program to increase school food investments. And that's what we're really looking forward to and hoping to see before the end of this fiscal year. However, we also recognize that because we've had a lot of chronic underfunding in school food programs, that beyond federal investment, additional provincial investment is welcome to make up any gaps in funding, to make these programs as effective and efficient as they need to be for the schools. And that working in partnership towards maybe a provincial-wide universal program, that when we're doing this as a long-term goal, the best programs are really made up of multiple lenses of expertise. It's not education doing it alone, but these programs are centered around local autonomy and the needs of school boards and communities, and they're leading this work, but in partnership with health, with food producers, with food service management expertise, and our community members. And that the importance of school food program evaluation and sharing. So we need to continue our path around deepening our understanding of how school food programs actually operate in Saskatchewan, because you really can't develop or improve something you don't know about. And including what are these opportunities and gaps? And documenting and evaluating our successes and sharing with others. That's one of the best ways. That's why, we're bringing people here today and throughout these coming months is to share our successes and continue to learn. And as Ted mentioned at the beginning, the SSBA now has a school food roundtable. That's part of, bringing school boards together to talk about this work and lead this work. And we're working on surveys to begin to understand and document. So there is a lot of work going, and I'll have to stop and thank everybody for being here today because my time is up. But if you have any further questions, feel free to send me an email. We'll have a question period following the end of this. And once again, you can join us next month for our next school food speaker series. I'll put a plug in for it now. And if you haven't registered or you don't have the February 27th date, there's a QR code up on the corner and we'll get you signed up for the remaining sessions. So thank you, everybody. And I'm going to turn it actually over to Stephanie for her presentation now. So thank you very much.
Hi, guys. Awesome. Okay. You covered some of my stuff already, Kaylee. That's excellent. That's good. That saves me time. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm excited to be here this afternoon. Kaylee and the SSBA, so awesome that you've put together this speaker series. It's great to be working in school food right now with the national program announcement last year. You know, everybody's all abuzz. There's lots of things happening. So as a testament to the number of people in this Zoom meeting, I think we know that this is important work that we're doing. I'm here today to talk to you about the needs assessment and community engagement guide that our team put together. As Kaylee mentioned, it is sort of part 2 of a 5-part series that we're putting together. The first one was the 15 promising cases document with all of those great profiles. The needs assessment and engagement guide is part 2. It looks at like sort of pre-planning for program development. Then we're coming out in early February with a food literacy guide, which will explore all the options for connecting food literacy to curriculum, teaching kids about cooking and gardening and food science and the like. We know that curriculum integrated programs are the most effective. So we're hoping schools will start to do that. Then there's an operations manual and costing guide coming with tons of recommendations for procurement, production, food service, budgets, governance, etc. That is going to be dropping late spring. And then there's an evaluation and monitoring component coming. We hope to have the whole guide with all 5 pieces delivered to everybody before the end of the school year. So cross your fingers for us. We're hopeful. But yeah, so today we're focusing on the needs assessment and engagement guide that was released in December. It's free to access. I'll provide a QR code and everything. I'm just going to share my screen and get a brief presentation for you. Okay. All right. Again, my name is Stephanie Foster. I'm coming at you from the University of Saskatchewan. A little bit about me. Currently, I'm working as a research manager with the College of Medicine and the Department of Community Health and Epidemiology at the University of Saskatchewan, looking almost exclusively at research around school food under Dr. Rachel Engler-Stringer. In my previous life, I was a teacher and a principal in small northern schools. So I do have a background in on-the-ground school food, managing programs, doing the grocery shopping, cooking, serving, cleaning up, the whole shebang. So I have a deep professional love for school food. That's where I'm coming from. Kaylee really touched on this already. Why do school food programs matter? There's lots of really great reasons. The one thing she didn't touch on, which I think is valuable for everybody to hear, because the sort of we're feeding kids, we're helping them with their academics, and building their nutrition. Like that's not an argument that works for everybody. So if you're doing advocacy work or you're trying to spread the gospel of school food, it's also important to know that it's really impactful on the economy. School food can have huge economic impacts. I was just reading a report from Ruitz Consulting, which was released last year, that looks at the economic impacts of school food. Your average family can save $130 to $190 per month per child using school food programs. There's at least a minimum of 2.5% return on investment is what the data shows when we keep school food programs like local, using local businesses and local producers. And then there's an estimate that we could save the healthcare system $26 billion a year if we improve student diets and nutrition overall. So there's a huge economic argument on top of the health and well-being of kids. So the needs assessment and engagement guide, a little bit of background. It's a 3-part framework that's fairly standard, based on the work of Witkin and Altschuld, who have a vast amount of literature talking about needs assessments, largely for commercial and corporate purposes. So taken their model and adapted it for our purposes because it's a great one. There's a Assessment, and post-assessment, 3 easy stages. The guide is for new or existing programs. So whether you're starting from the ground up, you've got nothing, or you've got a program that's, semi-functional and feeds quite a few kids and you want to grow it or expand it or formalize it, we're hoping the guide speaks to both of those conditions. The guide is coming from a place that encourages community consultation and collaboration and making sure that your programs are tailored to your school community. Each one should be individual. It should meet the needs of those who are using it. And then it includes tons of links to tools and resources. So we have an environmental scan, we have checklists and inventories for your kitchen, surveys, interviews, focus group questions. There's information on service and production models, and there's lots of background information if you want to know more about the national program and policy rollout, more about the up-to-date research in school food. That 15 promising cases document is linked. That's all linked in this document. So it's definitely an online e-document. There's really no point in printing it. I think if you print it out, A, you're reducing sustainability, and B, you're losing about 40% of the value of the guide from the resources that are in there. Where does the recommendations come from? Did we make it up, or where have we come up with all these ideas? So the first 2 there on the list are research projects. One that we conducted in Saskatoon and with Meadow Lake Tribal Council, looking at adapting school food programs to make them more universal and more culturally appropriate, particularly through an Indigenous lens. So we worked with schools in Meadow Lake First Nations to make their programs more robust, to build out their procurement model and find them new vendors, to tie more cultural food literacy to their meal programs, all that kind of stuff. We learned tons about community consultation and program development, and hopefully we've put all that knowledge into the guide. Then there is profiles throughout the guide, targeted profiles from some research out of BC where the researchers watched a meal program transition from pretty targeted, like emergency meals for kids who were in dire need, to a universally available program that's open at every school to every kid. And the researchers watched that, they followed along and learned a lot of important lessons that basically sort of prove the points of the guide. They sort of illustrate the points that we're making. So it was really great to have those profiles included in the guide. I'm the primary author of it, but there are we had a dozen or so school food experts from around the country participate, both academics and folks from school food focused nonprofits, providing recommendations, edits, review. So a lot of great minds have put their 2 cents here. And then, as I say, we have those recommendations from Witkin and Altschid about needs assessments and a bunch of guidance about community collaboration from nonprofit agencies that do that work. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you an overview. Again, it's a 25-page guide. You're gonna have to read it on your own, but I will give you a bit of an overview. As I say, it's a 3-phase framework with a bit of a caveat. The asterisk there is because before you do anything, you want to build your team, your needs assessment team, and there's lots of guidance in the guide on doing that. The one recommendation that we really feel very strongly about is that neither your needs assessment nor your meal program in general should fall on the back of a single champion. The nature of schools is that there's turnover, teachers get transferred, people move to different roles, they retire, there's leaves. And if your program or your needs assessment is on the back of a single human being, regardless of how devoted they are to school food, it can all come to a screeching halt. And we've seen it happen. So make sure that we're spreading out responsibility and we have a sort of, a few dedicated individuals, and even making sure that your procedures and your standards are written down which you'd be surprised how many schools don't have any written documentation. Making sure that all those things are written down so that the next guy who comes in to do the job has information available to them. Very, very valuable. Anyway, so that's the asterisk to this 3-phase framework. Make sure you have your team in place first. Then stage 1 is the pre-assessment. This is a very short phase, like 1 to 2 weeks. Doesn't cost any money, shouldn't, other than your staff time. You want to gather as much background information as you can that is already existing information. So demographics of your community, stats on existing programs, how many kids are you feeding, what are your current budgets, who are your current funders, getting some basic background knowledge, having your team get up to speed on current school food research, knowing what the national policy says so that you can align your programs to that. And then ultimately defining the goals of the assessment in general. So what do we want to accomplish here? Do we want to build a program from scratch, or do we want to take something that already exists but is struggling and make it better? What are the goals for your assessment? Stage 2 is the assessment itself. This is the part that's going to take you the longest. And this is where we encourage you to engage with your partners, particularly your school partners, school staff, teachers, even the janitors and the secretaries. You'll quickly find that school meal programs affect everyone in the building. Everyone plays a role. So school staff, families, students themselves, local partners, do surveys, have community meetings, gather as much information as you can from the people in your community, and then gather data about your program, inventories, do some research about what options are available for you in terms of procurement, in terms of local agencies that might be supportive, look at your existing procedures, analyze that, look at potential funding, and find out what what you've got and what the opportunities might be. And really through the whole assessment, you're looking at determining what the needs of your community are. Okay, that's step 2. And then step 3 is the post-assessment, where you take what you've learned, you create a vision and mission statement, or you hone an existing one. You sort of figure out what you want your program to look like moving forward, and then you draft your action plans, come up with your timelines, potentially put a budget together if you have enough information to do that. So that's the framework. Pre-assessment, assessment, post-assessment, fairly standard. For some of you, this is going to be just really intuitive. If you're a sort of an A-brain person and you're organized and very systematic in your thinking, this might be really baseline stuff. But for folks like me who are not that way, I think it's going to be a really valuable resource. So there's a QR code linking to this document. And again, all the links in the guide are open and available to everyone. And I'll drop the link in the chat as well. And I'm sure Kaylee's sharing out. So other than that, it brings us talking about this guide has really brought up 2 questions from people. So I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen here. The first question that comes up is, why bother doing a needs assessment in the first place? It is time consuming, it requires manpower. What's the point? How is it helpful? And we know, again, from the work that we've done and from the recommendations of experts, that having a plan in place and understanding your current contexts, the needs of your community, your currently available resources will help you manage your priorities, effectively utilize your resources, set goals, make effective decisions. It'll allow you to lay a bit of groundwork for ongoing monitoring and evaluation, so you can keep your statistics and your budgets organized, and generally going to save you time, money, and frustration. So if you have a good plan to build upon, you're going to save yourself some time and energy. And then the second why bother that comes out of it is why bother with community engagement? If you've worked in schools, you know that as soon as you involve parents and you bring the community in, things get really complicated. So why would you do that? Again, our whole how-to guide, all 5 parts are coming from a lens of community consultation and community engagement. We believe that it's super important. The research shows, for one, that when you involve parents and the school community, your staff, your students in the planning and design of your program, they're more likely to feel ownership of it, and they're more likely to participate. Your parents are more likely to volunteer. Your students are more likely to utilize the program. Everybody's going to have buy-in if they can help in the development in some way. It helps, again, with making those effective decisions and meeting real community need, not just what you perceive from the division office, but what is the actual need in the school community. And then it helps you to ensure that you're offering these programs with dignity. One thing about school food is that there's still quite a stigma around it sometimes. Kids are afraid to take a free meal. They don't want to look like the poor kid. Parents are, loath to accept charity from people. So if you consult with community and you find out what they need, you can build a program that offers the food with dignity in respectful and really culturally appropriate ways. So that's why you should bother with community engagement. And I know there's time for questions at the end, but I will leave it to Derek. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for those concluding thoughts. Really great takeaways and really quite meaningful. And I can hear you have a lot of experience thinking about this and experience implementing these tasks. So thank you for sharing your advice with us. I would now like to bring up Derek Smith from Prairie Valley School Division to share their journey on evaluating and working through school food programs towards distribution and equity within their school division. So here.
Oh,
Derek.
Kaylee, can I trouble you for a minute?
No.
All right. No, I can't.
I mean, no problem. Yes, you can
Okay,
trouble
there
me.
we go. I was like, oh, that's not starting off in a good way. I usually share on a different monitor. I've got a couple monitors here, so I'm going to try so I look at the right camera. I'm going to share, but I'm going to move my PowerPoint over the computer that has the camera. So you may see your faces right now. I slide over this to here. Well, is that going to work if I do it that way?
I think if you just, maybe, so we can see your notes.
We'll go to plan B. We'll do it this way. We'll go share, and we'll share too, but it might get a little annoying because I'm be looking back and forth. How's that? Does that work?
We're not seeing.
How about try that again?
Yep.
You can see the main PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Derek, as Kaylee has mentioned, and it's, I guess, an honor and quite excited to share with you information we've got from our school division and a little bit about where we were and where we are now and where we are planning to go. So just really quickly about me, I started my teaching career in Vermilion, Alberta, too many years ago. I'm not going to share. And then moved to my hometown in Lloydminster, was a teacher there for a few years. Bulk of my time there was as a school-based administrator, and then moved to Regina about 10 years ago. So I have 4 great kids, but they do remind me that I make dad noises from that term comes from an inappropriate adult cartoon, but if you hear me clearing my throat, that would be an example of a dad noise. So hopefully that's not going to happen too many times. So family background, 4 great kids. Court is a teacher with Saskatoon Public. One of my brothers, Chad, is a teacher in Lloydminster Public. My dad, Morris, was a teacher principal superintendent director with Lloyd Public, and then one of the amalgamated divisions through the first round of amalgamations at Bigger. And my nan and my grandma were both early learning educators. And I just recently found out that my great grandma was also a teacher. So I guess you could say it's a little bit in the genes. So, all right. So a quick overview of what I plan to cover today. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of a context of who Prairie Valley School Division is, our work with current work with our school food programs. I'll talk a little bit about our review process that we're undergoing right now, current work, the support we've given our nutrition workers, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about, and so now what? For those of you that aren't familiar with Prairie Valley School Division, you'll see the little map of Saskatchewan at the bottom left. I wasn't sure if we have attendees today from outside of the province or not, but I thought I would put it there, and you can see that we're actually quite a sizable school division. I think about 27,000 square kilometers, and there's a picture of our different schools and their logos. Kind of a neat fact. We have 9,000 students in that 27,000 square kilometers. I was just in the Woodlands in Texas last week. My brother is there. My niece is in a grade 7 to 8 school, 2,200 students in 2 grades. So a little different world down there. So the why, the school nutrition or food school program food. Let's try that again. School food programs have been a part of our division strategic plan and currently in our 4-year plan. And a comprehensive review of our programming is one of the actions as part of the board's strategic plan. So right now, our school division has 19 school food programs. So this is formalized programs with, I guess you would say that wouldn't matter what school you're in, you'd notice that they were fairly structured. So we know that all schools do have, I have a colleague that calls it loaves and fishes, where there's always a snack if somebody needed it, or a student without food, or maybe it's the student that wants, and we were mentioning it this earlier, the stigma. So you'd quietly provide lunch, but this would be more formalized programs. So the 8 division funded programs would be the schools that, and I know it's hard to put a name on it. I know that some of us would call them vulnerable, some of them would call them complex schools, but I guess they would be schools that need the extra support. Then we also have 11 schools that also run their own programs, but their staffing and food costs are covered by their school generated funds and are also offset by sales. The division funded programs get financial support for staffing, but they are still responsible for getting the food products, whether that, again, through donations. There's a lot of grant writing and other things to get the, also use the ministry's nutrition grant that comes in annually, but it's better than nothing, but really you'll see in some of our numbers, it's a drop in the bucket when you take a look at what our board does. So this is where we're at right now with the strategic plan. So one of the things that I've worked with Chelsea Brown with the Saskatchewan Health Authority. Thanks, Chelsea, you're here today. Chelsea's a registered dietitian that has supported us along the way for actually 8 years, has been a real support. And Kaylee through University of Saskatchewan. We developed our first environmental scan a year ago in a few months, just to get a sense of, so what's out there? Like we had a bit of an idea of what our schools were doing as far as the formal food programs, but we didn't want to assume. So we created a Microsoft form survey and we asked all schools to complete it, regardless of what was happening, just so that we knew exactly which was happening in all 39 schools. So the next 4 slides or so are going to just be some examples of what we, I guess, glean from the survey. So I'm not going to read it, but if you just take a minute, I don't know how big it would be on your screen, but for instance, we wanted to get a look at, so what types of foods were being offered here. Are they highly processed? Are they less processed? So we did go down, get pretty granular in some of our questions. Where is food prepared? So we wanted to take a look at, do we have that particular program, commercial kitchens, classroom, all of that? What did the location look like? We know that volunteers do support our school food programs, but again, we wanted to get a better idea of what that looks like. You can see most of our volunteer roles supported just taking food to classrooms, and our volunteers were also students. They don't have to necessarily be SEC members, for instance. And another example of a question helped us to understand, where's the money going? So what are you doing? Like school-based school food programs, where's your money going? Division-based programs, where's your money going? Like, we didn't know, and we couldn't assume to know. So we asked people, like I said, in the building. And we also wanted to get more of a qualitative measure on, and we've talked in this presentation today about what do you see? Why is it important? And so then I guess we just asked our administrators and our school nutrition workers. And so I think that this would probably align with any survey, national or provincial, local, about the benefits of having comprehensive school food program. It was interesting when I was talking with Kaylee quite a while ago, but we were talking about, and I'm going to mention our school impact factors a while ago, but the link between behavior and having nutrition at school. And then it got me thinking last night, okay, so what's a personal example? So I made a really snarky comment in our oh, I won't say it. The comment was valid. How I delivered the message wasn't the best. We've got great relationships with our superintendent. So I went into my colleague and I said, no, like I meant what I said, but I didn't deliver it well. And she was so gracious. She said, well, Derek, I walked by your desk and I know you were really busy because your lunch was still on it. You hadn't touched anything. And so clearly you hadn't had the nutrition that you needed. So I thought, okay, so if I'm dealing with that, and clearly our students who are coming from food insecure homes are sadly dealing with that every day, not just a missed lunch, right? Like boo-hoo. And then we did a second environmental scan just the past few months in the spring. And this time we laser focused on our 8 division funded serveries, so school food programs. And we wanted to know really specifically about them because we decided that the review was huge. Like this was a lot of work and continues to be a lot of work. And our priorities have to be on our FTE that we provide to those schools. So what we found, or what we were looking at, is frequency of meals, when the students receive nutrition, the number of students accessing, because you can have a really large school, vulnerable school, and you might still only have 50% of the students access. We have schools dealing with that issue in different ways. Some of them are offering free meals to every student. We've got one school that has about 80% Indigenous students, and that particular First Nation pays for all of those students' meals. So we really have a mix there. But again, it goes back to the amount of students, not necessarily just the size of the school. We really wanted to find out, your FTE, and this has been the real goal of this study or this review right now. How many students access and how does it cost to families? So sometimes it's been supplemented, sometimes free, different models. I'm sure all of you have seen different variations of this graphic. I particularly like this version because on the right, it talks about, the systemic barrier. So I really think that a lot of the work that we're doing with universal school food programs is addressing or is trying to address, the societal systemic barriers rather than just band-aid an issue, right? Like we're really trying to um, support our families, and not just our families in need. Like I know you folks see what your bill is like when you go to the grocery store. It's hard, and it's just not going to get any easier out there. So our big question right now is with those 8 vulnerable complex schools, is the FTE equitable, appropriate? Part of what we found when we were initially looking at this is, okay, so why was school A, why did they have 0.5? School B have 0.75, and it's been kind of a historical creep. So we needed to get a better handle of this because in order to address, our strategic plan, the effective and appropriate use of school division resources. Also fairness to schools. Of course, you've heard throughout the presentation, food insecurity at home equals an increased need for school food programs. How am I doing on time, Kaylee?
You can have another like 5-6 minutes. Yep, you're good.
Got really challenged the other day again by some of my loving colleagues that I talked to. So child food insecurity, again, like this is an American graphic, but certainly kind of scary. You're talking about physical ailments, stomach aches, respiratory infections, headaches, mineral deficiencies, and 1 in 6. So they're talking about 23%. This is probably, I think the data earlier was 28, so I'm sure it's higher now than this 23.3. So in our review then to see if we had the appropriate FTE, we looked at these impact factors. So we took stats cans, which are research-based as far as needs, and they correlate to the need for school food programs, but also food insecurity. And then we also pulled our own PVSD factors that we have a really, really good stats guy. I call him the Excel god, that we track so much of this for our data booklets. And this is just an example of some of the files that were created. You can see different weightings. We had to determine weighting scores, and there was a combination formulas, all of that. And again, this is a work in progress. And from that, we used some data to try and sort out, okay, so I blocked out the schools. This is very much kind of hypothetical work in progress, but it's definitely a stab at it. The FTE are supported by the division, but I'll show Ted, especially in his advocacy. Now, it would be estimated high because they would not be providing all 181 days. There's a few other factors there. It's not going to we wouldn't be doing 2.7 million, but I'll guarantee you it's over $1 million. That's food prices, and schools are doing that through grants, volunteers, all of those other things that I talked about. So Chelsea Brown has been key to this. I'll just give you a quick minute to read that. This is just an example of PD we've provided to our nutrition workers. Was a pun, by the way, a taste of. I'm known for humor around here. Really, really like when we had the public health inspector in, our nutrition workers quite like that. And then a lot of our presentations, we asked, what the nutrition workers liked about the tea that was provided. My role was really to sample Chelsea, sample all the different foods that were prepared. Really liked the round tables so they could discuss and network. Here's an example of the asks our nutrition workers have had. Again, just a few so you get a flavor. You'll note by the last check mark, you can pretty much date where that one came from, which year. Now where are we headed? Well, like I mentioned, the FTE review for our spring budget for the board. Support the 8 division funded schools in similar meal options. So we got to see, okay, so you have the FTE, what are you offering? And what's the quality? And we're going to lean on, the university, the interns, the nutrition workers, Kaylee, all kinds of resources. That's going to be down the road. We're not there yet. Sure, quality meals. That should be like, not alike. That's a challenge. Nutritious, cheap, and what kids will eat. That's something we've had to work on. And then we'll take a look eventually at our school funded programs because they're going to need support too. Workload intensification. I don't believe that we should have our administrators shopping on weekends. Just don't, and I don't think anybody does. Schools do what they need to do, but I think it's our role as a board and as senior administrators, province, we got some of that. We're doing a lot already. So what are some ways that we can support schools? And then the other, prepare for hopefully federal funds. Of this quote, doesn't matter if you're religious, spiritual, or agnostic or whatever, using the blessed word, blessed are we who don't know the next right thing when trying to clear a path for our most vulnerable children and people. Path is covered with debris. We don't even know which branch to pick up first. And blessed are we who cannot even see the path in front of us. I think for all of you that are and our division that are starting down the journey and everything else, I think this is where we're at. So again, thanks to Ted and Kaylee and the SSBA. I know it looks really complicated or whatever, complex. We've been doing this work a long time. And I have, even though it's in my portfolio, such a great team. Kayla's here right now from finance, and we've had facilities that have supported, and our senior admin, Gord, our director. And really, a lot of this goes back to former directors of education who had a vision as well. So hopefully that was really close to 20 minutes. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Derek. What an incredible journey that you've been on to figure out what's going on with your schools and implementing and working through change. And what I can say, working with you in Prairie Valley over the last while is the innovation and spearheading some of this work and trialing and testing and coming up with new ways. When you asked, what's the appropriate staff level for our programs? That's not a question that there's an easy answer to. So some of your preemptive work to begin to sort of qualify and look at staffing levels, I think will be really an interesting learning that we can continue to share and might be of interest to other school divisions. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. That concludes all our presentations, but we'd really invite and love to hear if there's any questions from our audience here for any of the speakers or any comments you would like to make or anything sort of brewing in your minds. You can put in the chat or just unmute and let us know. Or I guess raise your hand. Um, I see one participant has their hand up. Is it Jeannie?
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm joining you all today from British Columbia, and I saw your event happening. I was really interested because I support the development in our school district of these programs, and I always think there's great learning to happen across provinces. We do have a good support network in BC, but I really enjoyed the presentation. It gave me a few new insights today. And one of my questions was, there were some really great statistics that were shared there about the food insecurity for Canadian kids and about the potential cost savings. I think it was $26 billion a year for children in regards to public health. I just wondering where we could go to find those. I found those statistics are really powerful and meaningful when we're trying to advocate for funding or even trying to get different levels of government to understand that participation would be really of great benefit for them as well.
Jeannie, I'll see if I can find a link to the resource I was talking about, and I'll put it in the chat. Give me 1 second.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. That'd be great.
And thank you for joining us out of province. That's, one of the messages that we also learned from this cross Canada work was this how much the plethora of information we can learn from each other. But what we particularly wanted to highlight with this Saskatchewan School of Food Speaker Series, which actually hasn't been done before, where we've, intentionally come together and sort of with multiple partners to discuss school of food programs, was to begin to highlight what's going on in Saskatchewan, because sometimes I have in my past as a nutritionist, dietitian, looked at examples of a lot of community food and things going on in other provinces in Canada. Um, but there is a lot of partnerships and great work happening here, and that's what we really hope to bring to this speaker series and to showcase to other Canadians across the province who are joining and across Canada who are joining us in these conversations. Is there any other questions? Otherwise, maybe I will have a question. Okay, Gord, please share.
Hi, Derek. I was really impressed with that data and feedback. Have you had a chance to get any feedback from parents yet?
As far as our review,
Yeah, just
yeah, so no, that's a really good question, Gord. Right now, what we're doing in our system is trying to get that measure so that we have pretty clear information that we can take to communities because we have made changes or whatnot in the past, but yet we haven't been able to justify it, right? Like, okay, so why is this school getting this program? Why is it changing? So we really wanted to make it clear for the board and our stakeholders about why. But that's an excellent point to involve kids and involve parents, and whether it's for menu planning or whatever the case is, they have to be a part of it as well. SCCs, I think, would be and they have, I guess in saying that, the SCCs have played a role in giving feedback to school-based administrators. We just haven't done it, I guess, at a systemic level. It would be more kind of one-offs. Those discussions I know have happened with principals. Thank you.
There's a question here that I'll let Ted answer. Is the Saskatchewan government currently negotiating for federal funding? If there's any insights or
Yeah,
you'd like
sure.
to
I can
share on
take a
that.
stab at that. Of course, I can't answer on their behalf what they're doing, but certainly can communicate that our organization has been advocating for that strongly since, of course, the announcement at both the national level with the Canadian School Boards Association and, of course, locally here. Our vice president and president just actually met with our minister and deputy minister within the last couple of weeks here, week and a half or so, and that certainly was one of the topics that they discussed, and I can communicate that certainly strongly encouraging the province to jump on board, and as it would be a great support to boards of education.
We have a question from Ryan. Yeah.
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for the great presentations. I'm joining from BC as well. I represent Breakfast Club of Canada, and our role across the Canadian School Breakfast Program Network is really to provide funding, provide resources, provide support, equipment, expertise, and advice to schools across the country. And so it's really great to see that a lot of the stakeholders from one province are coming together to share stories, share successes, ask questions. My question was for Derek. Near the end of your presentation, you noted that one of the challenges for the individually funded schools was pulling them away from having administrators, teachers, volunteers going to grocery stores on the weekend to procure the food. I was just wondering if you're looking at bringing the district in to help centralize the procurement of food across the entire district for all the schools, or what plans you've made in that area.
A great question, Ryan. Thanks for that. So I don't know what system you're with, or I guess you're provincial in BC, but again, I go back to my niece's school versus us. Our furthest school from our office in Regina would be probably Kelleher, 200 kilometers. We do have our procurement officer with Gordon's Food Service and a couple others that we will provide that if available, but there's just some of our buildings are just so far away. So that's another thing we're going to have to work at is, for instance, Kelleher, their closest community would be probably Melville. And so what the nutrition worker might be taking some of their FTE to drive and get food, right? So they're paying for it, but they're kind of losing out a little bit. But our communities like Pilot, Butte, White City, not only can they go 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute drive, there's this big box store that starts with a C that can save them a heck of a lot of money in food. So yeah, you know, Ryan, we really struggle with that being a large rural system.
I think that struggle is shared with large rural districts across the country.
Yeah.
Whether you name the province, that is the biggest struggle that we've heard of over the last few years.
I think, you know, maybe down the road, a possible solution would be local growers, local farmers, you know, trying to figure out some kind of agreement that way might be a nice positive way to build community and access food products too. Thanks.
Thank you for that rich discussion. Were there any other questions? We just have a few minutes, and I don't see anything in the chat right now, but I might just ask Derek or Stephanie if you have any final thoughts about, as school divisions here might be anticipating hopefully maybe some federal funding, or and they may begin starting to think about their own school division. What advice would you give them as sort of the initial stages of working towards understanding or developing their program? What would be a key message you might leave with them?
I'll defer ladies first.
Do a needs assessment and community engagement. One thing I would say, and we learned this in the school food development project when we were working with those Meadow Lake First Nation schools, is don't be afraid to like try some stuff. I think there's this impression that like once you've invested some money and some time in something that you have to keep plowing ahead with it, even if it's not working. But if you want to try a snack program, like try a snack program for a month, find out the costs, find out the human resources commitment, find out how it's going to work. You know, tell your schools and your student bodies, like, this is what's happening. We're just trying it out for a month and see how it goes. Don't be afraid to, pilot some stuff. I think would be my advice.
I would echo that. I think just get going. Like there's no point in sitting back and being fearful. Just start. Like I'm not a great thinker of like I tend to spin my wheels and some of that big picture stuff, and I really have to rely on, other people around this in my office here. And I pick brains and I do other things. It's like, okay, that's a good idea. And I can do the A, B, C, D, E stuff better than I can. So I would say really, and I know it's so hard with time, but carve out a little bit of time with people starting in your office to say, okay, this is what we need to do. Let's start. Again, like we've been doing this a while, and I know, it's not easy for school divisions to start initiatives, but lean on resources, lean on networks, and just go. There's kids that need food, and what you're doing now is great. Tweaking a few things just takes you down a path.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those messages. Ted, any final thoughts from you before we close up?
No, just a big appreciation to Kaylee, Derek, and Stephanie. As you see from the chat and the comments, appreciated your expertise and the practicality of it, and your enthusiasm for this comes across in spades. And so, thank you so much for today.
Thank you all very much for joining us, and please stay tuned and join us for our next speaker series on February 27th, where the same time it's at 1:30 to 3 p.m. If you need that registration link, please reach out to me. Derek, did you have something else to add?
Just one quick, just a quick word. If you're ever wanting any questions answered or anything like that, I'm not an expert, but like don't ever hesitate to reach out by phone call, email, whatever. I can share things we've learned along the way and things we're still going to learn.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that would be much appreciated by others on the line here. Thank you so much. Okay, take good care, everybody. And like I said, you can reach me at kmechnick@saskschoolboards.ca if you have any further follow-up or questions or need help with registering for the sessions moving forward. So thank you very much. Take good care.